The content of this video is to test my understanding of the developmental systems approach, and it includes the following. First, what is the developmental system approach? Second, the theories of Bronfenbrenner and Gottlieb. Third, an explanation of why this approach requires an interdisciplinary approach. Fourth, an example of how this approach can be applied in practice. People undergo many changes in their life. Along with these changes, lies with regression in between, there is that thing we call development. Developmental psychology theories tend to explain development in terms of progression through life stages, a systematized and successive change. By that, it is highly expected that people undergo many physical, cognitive, social, intellectual, and emotional changes throughout life. And it is these changes that developmental psychologists study. Historically speaking, if there is a constant context wherein you can put a debate about how does development happens to an individual, according to the developmental systems approach, two things interact continually, and through their interaction, each of them contributes to development, and these two are what we call nature and nurture. The developmental systems approach argues that development can be influenced. This also implies that there is no one course of development. Children grow up in distinct contexts, unique combinations of personal and environmental circumstances that can result in different paths of change. By this, I have now an idea that development itself is like a complex system. This approach also argues that through the influence of interacting factors at multiple levels of organization, development happens. And to understand this particular statement, two theories were introduced to us. The first theory was introduced by Uri Bronfenbrenner, and he called his model the bioecological model. Before Bronfenbrenner, developmental psychology focused on individual influences on development in unnatural settings. Bronfenbrenner changed developmental psychology by calling attention to a large number of environmental influences on child development, from the people and institutions immediately surrounding a person to nationwide cultural forces. According to this theory, the environment is a complex system consisting of interacting layers or nested systems that together affect development, and Bronfenbrenner created 5 systems to categorize influences on development. These are microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, macrosystem, and chronosystem. For microsystem, this is the innermost layer of Bronfenbrenner's model. This context is closest to an individual and encompasses interpersonal relationships and direct interactions with immediate surroundings. Then, mesosystem includes interactions between various aspects of the microsystem. On the other hand, exosystem does not directly affect individuals. Rather, it encompasses aspects of structures within microsystem. The fourth system, which is macrosystem, is a system that consists of cultural values, laws, customs, and resources. And the last system, named chronosystem, refers to the continuous influence of time on all other subsystems and their interactions. In conclusion, the interaction of this model is mainly in between an individual and his or her environment. This theory has more emphasis on the levels within the individual. Meanwhile, Gilbert Gottlieb introduced a theory, and along with this, the model called probabilistic epigenesis was presented. From the name itself, epigenesis is a change in genetic expression as a result of environmental influences. Or to put it simply, a development involving genetics and the interaction within the environment. More into that, he added, probabilistic to emphasize how the developmental outcome is not as constant and certain as the basis to a lot of factors. Probabilistic epigenesis holds that human behavioral development does not proceed along with predetermined courses. Instead, it presents development as a rather unfixed process that occurs due to ongoing, reciprocal exchanges between a person's genetic heritage and the social environment. Genes provide the blueprint of the organism from which proteins are made in cells. Thus, in this model, the most basic level of organization is that of gene activity. Lisa Rundy, an instructor, stated a simple way to understand the basic concept of this theory, and it is to think of a sculptor with a lump of clay. Clay is the genetic material that a person is born with. The sculptor is the environmental force that shapes the clay. Let's imagine that the two identical lumps of clay are in the hands of two different sculptors. The first sculptor creates a beautiful statue out of clay, while the second sculptor forms the clay into a vase for flowers. The same potential existed in each lump of clay, but the forces acting upon the clay produced two different outcomes. This is similar to how genetics and the environment interact in our development. Each person's genetic potential is present at birth, but the expression of that potential is dependent upon how they are sculpted by their environment. Developmental Systems Theory, or DST, is an overarching theoretical perspective on biological development, heredity, and evolution. It emphasizes the shared contributions of genes, environment, and epigenetic factors on developmental process. Hence, upon connecting those contributed factors as an individual undergo developmental processes, interdisciplinary approach is needed. It gives importance to the incorporation of knowledge and skills from multiple areas of learning, which will eventually turn into developmental outcomes. In ensuring that goals and experiences are suited to the learning and development, no matter how challenging it is to promote the individual's progress and interests, this approach can be put into practice. For example, from the article, Applying the Developmental Systems Approach to Well-Being, it was well stated how the developmental youth well-being should be understood in interaction with the environment, between people, culture, and the various social and physical places that surround them.